I've got here with me in the studios Okpeyemi Oguntade, who is an economic research analyst with Financial Derivatives Company. So we'll start that conversation, which I know in the coming days will continue to heat up. That's what's been driving a lot of conversations since the beginning of the week, since the plan to unveil the new roadmap actually hit the social media. And there's been so much about it. So let's talk to Okpeyemi and get her thoughts on this matter as the unveiling goes on in the nation's capital, Abuja. Okpeyemi, good morning. Thank you so much for joining me on the program.
Always a pleasure.
So let's take a look at this, very big issue. A lot of conversations already on with regards to it. What do you make of this new policy that will be unveiled today? 7 big wins, focusing on very key areas, if you like.
Well, from what we can see from the policy, it seems like the government is willing to shift more towards private sector participation, specifically in the gas industry. And we know one of the big wins that was mentioned was gas revolution, and it's looking like the government is trying to shift away from more towards gas. And we know some of their short-term priorities is drafting the legislative procedures that have to do with the restructuring of the oil and gas sector. In the medium term, they intend to kind of initiate some kind of pricing policies, modeling, and then also in the long term, they want to try and ensure that the supply of gas within Nigeria, in terms of gas infrastructure, improves. Because we know that right now our proven gas reserves is about 186 trillion cubic feet, and we have a potential of about 600 million trillion cubic feet, and about 80% of our power plants are actually supplied by gas or powered by gas. So looking at this roadmap, I think the focus is more towards gas. It's nice to know that they're planning towards it. I mean, the easiest part of a goal is to plan towards a goal, but at the end of the day, it all boils down to execution. And recent policies that have been adopted so far with respect to exchange rate adjustment, the execution has not been particularly great. We're hoping that with this roadmap for the oil and gas industry, the execution will be better off than what we saw in June.
And you see, it's also coming at a time when you have most of these oil majors divesting already from the downstream sector. So do you think that will now create room for people, for instance, for other companies, to come in? Do you think it will give more private sector participation in the downstream sector?
Yes, definitely. Well, in the downstream sector, I'm not too sure, because all we're saying is there's a divestment, like you rightly mentioned. 7 years ago it was Chevron. This year we're seeing Mobil selling 60% equity, and there's a rumor going around that Total might be selling off some of its downstream. But I think what the international community is trying to do is focus more on upstream and midstream. And I think with this policy, it's the point of the roadmap is to attract international investors and the international oil community, which I think would work out for the government.
No, but until they get a very clear, that's the investors now, until they get a very clear position with regards what these policies really are going to be telling them, do you think that also this is a good time and it makes a good case for having modular refineries coming on stream? I know that's a conversation that has really been on for a very long time, back and forth, whether we should have modular refineries. Yes, we should have modular refineries, but who should actually build these refineries?
At the end of the day, I think the point of this roadmap is to increase the participation of the private sector. And I think what the government is trying to show is that they're willing to share some of these activities, and what they would most likely want to do is just regulate while the private sector handles the business, which is the best way it would work, because we know government in business isn't necessarily the best. We've seen that in the power sector, and eventually they had to succumb to the markets and move over to privatize the power sector. So I think in terms of who would own the refineries, I think the government is probably going to hint more towards leaving that for the private sector to handle while they regulate how gas is priced in the market.
And also that forms most of the burning issues that everybody will be looking out for. Taking a look at your summation in terms of your survey for the week. Focados is back online, and that's something to be very cheery about.
Yeah, I mean, after 8 months, it's a very long time. I know there was a report recently that actually calculated how much Nigeria has lost from Focados being offline. It was about 600 billion naira, which is about about going towards $2 billion. So I think Focados coming back online is really good, but then we need to make sure that the issues pertaining to Niger Delta militants are resolved as soon as possible, because the oil revenue is really needed. And I don't know, other burning issues we've seen there, we saw that the debt management office is actually putting a cap on how much, the federal government can borrow, about to, $22 billion. If not, we're going to pass the level of debt sustainability. Presently, right now, I think we're about 13% of GDP. But if we borrow above the $22 billion that is set there, then we'll go above the 19% of GDP target that was set by the government.
So even the 30 billion that the federal government is actually looking at to borrow might not. Well, it pushes us well above our threshold.
Yes, because the 22 billion actually it's an aggregate of external as well as domestic debt. So even if we were going to say, okay, the 30 billion is looking to come from the domestic investors, it wouldn't work out, because 22 billion is actually combining both domestic and external debt.
But then we also noticed mixed movements in the domestic market this week. Could you just take us through some of the issues?
Well, good news. The price of rice is coming down. As at last week, it was about 23,000, and this just shows that this is in line with what the Minister of Agriculture said, that he expects the rice to come down, the price of a bag of rice to come down before November. And so we're seeing it tapering down largely because there's increased production coming from Anambra, coming from Ebonyi, and as well as the north. So that's really good news on that side. But then looking forward, we know that the festive season is approaching, and we usually see an increase in demand for rice. So we're still a bit skeptical if this downward trend will be sustainable. But there's a lot of smuggling going on through the borders. It's looking like there's an excess supply of rice as we're looking at it now. Even Koshcharis is looking to go into the agri-business. He has about 5,000 hectares in Anambra State, and the CBN has provided credit for him to explore rice production in that area. So I think going forward, importation of rice is looking feasible now. Removing the importation of rice in 2017 is looking feasible because a lot of people are going into the rice business. And going on into other commodities, we're seeing that garri and palm oil is increasing as well, and this is largely due to increased consumption. I think we can see that palm oil is pretty much a good business now. I mean, look at Presco's results, really impressive, 98% increase in net income. So I think for palm oil, we're probably going to see, an increase in price going forward, because there's actually an increase in demand for that. And we also know that we use palm oil for a lot of things. And we're seeing that a lot of FMCGs are looking to come back to Nigeria for local content. Guinness is looking to increase its local content by about 44%. We know that PZ Cousins is looking to invest about $300 million in, backward integration. So palm oil is definitely a commodity that will probably still experience an increase in price due to the upsurge in demand.
And all this is happening at a time when we still see the naira still under pressure. For instance, at the interbank foreign exchange market, it didn't finish too well yesterday. We saw it at 307.28 kobo, and at the parallel market, it's hovering around 470. So in the coming days, that will not definitely be so much of an issue. For instance, for commodity traders.
At the end of the day, we know that there's some commodities there that we know that are imported. Particularly looking at the price of flour. Flour now has increased to 14,000, which is twice where it was at the beginning of this year. So we know that we import wheat and we refine it to make flour. And obviously this is going to affect the price of those imported commodities. So exchange rate is still going to play in the domestic markets because of some of our commodities. Some of the raw materials we use to make these commodities are imported. Even looking at bread, presently right now, bread is about 350 naira for a loaf. And we've been speaking to traders, and they're saying what they're planning to do to adjust is kind of reduce the quantity that they sell at 350 without increasing the price, so that they don't chase away consumers. But there's only so much they can do, because looking at the price of wheat is probably still going to go up if we still have this exchange rate depreciation. So at some point, they would have to push up the price of bread beyond 350 naira for a loaf.
No, a lot of people will have to take that out. That's a staple food that a lot of people, depend on, and you have to take it out. But then how would all of this impact on the CPI for October that we should be expecting anytime soon from the National Bureau of Statistics?
Well, really, we've seen, if we compare month on month, the movement in prices, commodity prices have increased. Flour, corn, maize, sorghum, palm oil, garri. The only thing we're seeing that is coming down now is rice, and quite frankly, I hope that it's sustainable. I really do hope, because, I mean, December period is coming, and a lot of people are hoping to receive that bag of rice from their firm. And I really hope that, the decline in prices are sustainable, because, I mean, if it remains at 20K, we probably we probably wouldn't see.
No, you probably wouldn't eat rice.
Yeah.
So what can we eat for the holiday if you can't eat rice? What's a holiday without a plate of rice?
I think you just have to fill up your plate with chicken or something and then forget rice.
All right, Okpeyemi, thank you so much for coming on the program this morning, of course.
Thank you for having me.